I don't even have to introduce the folks that I'm inviting onto the stage because you've just spent a while with them. But please join me in welcoming Director Ondi Timoner, her mother, Lisa, and Morgan, and Symbol. I have a question for Symbol, so it'll be great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just cried a lot, so I'm just...
Yeah, this is like the first time I've had to do a Q&A where I had to be like, okay, I have to compose myself again so that I can be professional or something. So first, thank you again for being here, all of you. I want to start sort of where you were.
Can I just say,
Yes.
start off with, this is the best audience I have ever witnessed. And I go to, you are so enthusiastic, and especially over there, laughed a lot. I loved it. Thank you for having us.
Oh. So, Ondi, in the introduction, you mentioned that you thought you were going to roll cameras to kind of bottle up your dad. Can you talk about sort of the unfolding that allowed it to become something that you're now able to share with the world?
Sure. I think during those weeks we didn't really know. I mean, we just had no idea what was going to happen next or what. The cameras immediately allowed me to feel more present because I wasn't worried about forgetting anything that he said or did. And so that was like a safety blanket in a way. And instead of mediating anything, it really connected me to the experience. But I agree with my mom. I haven't felt this present with like the last 20 minutes of the movie as I did just now in a long time. Yeah, well, I wasn't here the whole way through, but okay, you want to? Oh, I defer to the elders, the elder women in my family. I don't know if you noticed in the movie when my sister schools me pretty hard.
Yeah.
But
They laughed at that part.
it's a really important moment. I mean, it's humor, but it's also, it's humorous, but it's also such a great learning that we can't take people's shame away. They have to shed it themselves. And there was just so much learning that happened over those weeks that we didn't even have any idea what. It was the most transformative experience of my life. And if my job has always been and my great joy of doing what I do is that I get to go out into the world and learn things and then come back and share what I learned in films. And here I have this, the greatest, most unbelievable learning experience of my life. And if I felt like it would be wrong not to share it, even though it was intended to be very private footage. Yeah. It was just on all levels. I mean, it was very helpful having a rabbi in the family. The rituals she brought were, Mom just commented on how beautiful it is when the dialogue drops out at the end and we're washing Dad's body. I can tell you it was a wonderful thing to do, to honor his body like that and to connect with him like that as he was leaving it. It was like, you all should do that, I mean, we all have to go through this. That's the thing. It's just the most universal thing. So some of the things we learned, I felt like it was really going to be helpful to people, more helpful than anything I've ever made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it?
And that's why we're doing this. I'm sorry to even
yes.
take over your big screen like
fine.
this, but it is kind of
biggest QR
tonight the
code.
launch of the Impact campaign. We're going to try to help change the law for a lot of people who are, terminally ill in this country. In Nevada, it's about to turn. In Massachusetts, it's close. And Compassion and Choices, which is the main organization of this cause, really thinks this film helps a lot in helping people to change their opinion because Dad's so clear and so tender and everything that Dad is and so clear about his decision and courageous, and I think in watching this time because of our support of him, how we as a family had no idea the law even existed and then we just had to get behind him and it was like wind in his sails to have agency over his own body after 40 years of being paralyzed, and we just had to support it, I don't know, you got to say something.
Well, I'm going to be asked.
Well, I know, yeah. So I'm going to ask. So, it felt like you were like, okay, wait, this is something that I want to share. Was the rest of the family immediately willing to allow those vulnerable moments where, earlier we heard you just like, you're like, whatever, I'm in my curlers. This isn't a movie that I'm in.
Right.
But they haven't heard that.
No, yeah, so.
The memorial video and No, you tell them.
I think, okay, yeah, that's right. You said it at the luncheon.
Oh, I said it at the luncheon. How many of you were at the luncheon? All right. I did a good job recruiting people at the luncheon.
It's true. Now they have to listen to the story for a second time, but it's
Sorry,
fine. They'll
it's
allow it.
it's very important story.
Yeah, it is.
I probably wouldn't have touched this footage. I didn't intend to make a film, and I probably wouldn't have looked at it for quite a while after having gone through it, as you can, I'm sure, understand. But my sister said, well, you have all this footage. Why don't you make a 5-minute memorial video? Can you do that? Like a few days before Dad died. And I said, sure. So 2 weeks after Dad died, I sat down and turned on the Avid and opened the footage, and I couldn't believe it. Dad was like alive in the editing room, and it was like, for a grieving person who has lost like the rock and center of their life, for him to be like on screen and just talking, it was like the greatest gift that at 30 years of being a documentary filmmaker provided me with this moment when filmmaking was like really there for me for the first time. So anyway, he came alive. I couldn't stop cutting. A week later, I hand my sister a 32-minute memorial video. She's upset with me. You've seen what that looks like. She had a memorial plan. She's like, Dad asked me to plan a memorial, and you've made a film. Now it's a film screening. What am I going to do with my memorial service? You know. So she reduced the amount of speakers, and she was upset for a while. But at the reception, we all were taken with how people's feelings about death had changed from watching it. Even just the memorial video, which really was the more feel-good moments of it, you know. But it did help them to understand it. It helped them to understand what it looks like to die with some dignity when you're terminally ill and when you're paralyzed and when you're just done with living, you know. And it was like an incredible thing for them to see him joking about tennis and joking about penis buttons and everything else, like right up to the end, you know, and offering to warm his grandson's hands and passing wisdom along, you know. It was just, so I just kept cutting as I went from like grieving daughter to filmmaker and realized everybody in the film had an arc, and that Dad was the captain of that room, and the room was the most beautiful room we'd ever been in, any of us, and we loved that time. It was sacred. And so a film came out like 2 months later, a film like emerged from that. And then I spent the time until Sundance, like finding the home video and finding Juki with the turkey that I knew I filmed every year, you know. And I was like, where is it? And they're like, no, we can't find it. And finally I popped in a tape that said birthday. And Juki's birthday's near Thanksgiving, and it was stuck in that tape. So anyway, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how the movie happened.
Yeah.
And now you're going to, okay.
Well,
It
and
is up
now
to
I'd
you.
love to hear, Lisa, you know, you're sharing some tough weeks with the world. And when you watch that for the 501st time today, you know, what is that experience like for you? Were you always like, cool, yeah, sure.
Pretty much.
Okay.
I don't ever buck my daughter. She's a very strong.
You don't cross the director.
I
We
don't.
know that.
Both of us, Eli and I, both. And what it's been like is it's been helpful for me for the longest time in the beginning. I mean, it's been 2 years now, but in the beginning, I watched it every night. I watched bits of it before it was put together in a film. And once it was a film, and I have a link because I have a connection, anytime I got lonely, like late at night, he's not there, and he's always been there. I would turn it on and be with him, and he's so cute and funny and sweet and caring about everybody else but himself. That's the way his mother was. He inherited that. She died of cancer. I know this is off topic, but she died of cancer, and but she was always worried about everybody else, you know. So anyway, he got that from her.
Has it been also, you know, what is you mentioned that they are one of the best. You said the best.
The best.
The best audience. So watching with an audience, can you?
By far.
Yeah, is that by far. Wow. The best by far.
What happened in here? I'm sorry I didn't stay for the whole thing.
Responsive to everything. That you were responsive to everything, and whether it was sad or funny. And you know, people just don't do that. You got it. You got his humor. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed, though, or if you could see that, like when he'd be talking to, even before the stroke, when he'd be talking to an audience or talking when he was interviewed on television, do you get the modesty? I mean, that blows me away. I have a picture here of him, and it's my favorite because you just see his modesty, which I just loved. I mean, he was so accomplished, but he never, I mean, a vice president of his wrote a book about all the airlines he had worked for, Braniff and this and that. And then he worked with Eli, and he said he was the only airline executive without an ego. He was just extraordinary.
Yeah.
And the challenge in the film is the real challenge that we went through as a family. I mean, there was such a bigger thing going on than making this film. I was not intending to make the film, and my father had said, I instinctively know you're on the right track when I asked for permission when he was still in the hospital. I think he was the only one who knew that we were making a film, actually, now that I look back on it. And I felt his presence there with me. Well, he was there because he was in the editing room on screen, but he also, right when we were locking picture for Sundance, in fact, when we had to lock the picture that day, and this is Mom's favorite story.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah. The Avid crashed, and I had been editing for 18 hours straight, and it hadn't been saving. And but it kept going. Like, it wasn't saving, but it also wasn't stopping. And so I wasn't stopping. And it was like, it had to be in the night before, and now it's 7 a.m, and it just stops working totally. And I tried everything that I'd ever learned that could bring an Avid back, and it wasn't coming back. And Morgan came and found me on the floor on my knees praying. Or she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm praying." And I said, "I'm Dad. I know that you said you're going to watch over us, and thought that was a really nice idea. And if you are there, I would really love to be done with this." I was really close. I had made like 1,000 edits, and many of which I wouldn't necessarily remember right away. Like just all night long. And I said, "But I'll redo everything if I know this might be beyond your technical capacity." And then she said, "Well, hit the button, And so I did, and it whirred and swooshed, and it just looked like it wasn't going to do anything. And then all of a sudden, my sister giving the sermon popped up on the screen, and then everything came back, and not even like no minute was lost. Like usually when an Avid crashes, no matter what, it saves maybe 5 minutes before that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there was nothing gone, and it was all like intact. So I called her, called Mom, and I'm like, "Wake up. We're going to Dad's grave to say thanks." And we went over there, said thanks, and then I went to bed.
And you went to bed.
Yeah, but that's not even the story that proves that he's watching over us.
Right.
The story that proves that he's watching over us is your story.
She's the director.
Oh no, I
It's
want
a
to hear
good
the
story.
story. I don't know
But
the story, so I don't know how to
so
ask
many
for
people
it.
had their hands up, and I said, tonight I will tell you
Yes,
how we
it's
know
true.
Dad is watching over us.
It's
So-
true.
Oh, yeah, this happened recently, like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I don't know, did I tell you that, Karen?
No, I haven't heard the story yet. I'm very eager to hear it. I've been teased.
I fell in my kitchen. I had coffee grounds in my hand to throw away, and there was a cart there because I had shopped. I had done Costco that day by myself. And I tripped on the cart, and I went flying into the trash bags. And it fell on my head, the trash. And I'm on my stomach, and I'm wondering why I can't hear. It's full of coffee ground, my ear. So I try to get up. The counters were too high to be of help. So I pushed myself on my back through the kitchen and into the living room and over to Eli's blue chair that you see him sitting in. And it was just the right height, and I pulled myself up, and I felt fine. I shook everything out, and nothing hurt. And there was that sofa that I live on, and I got on the sofa, nice and comfy, and I was supposed to go to Ondi's to pick up some food she had for me. So I called her, and I said, "Ondi, I fell, and I just want to stay put. I don't want to go anywhere. I have MSNBC on, and I'm being entertained. And I'm lying there, and she said, well, that's okay, Mom. Jenny is coming that way, and she'll bring, Jenny, my assistant, will bring what you were going to pick up. So 10, 20 minutes later, I hear the gate open, and my front door is ajar for the dog to go in and out, and I'm lying on the sofa, and it's Jenny, right? Then I hear a man's voice, and I think, oh, I'm not expecting a man. I feel a little vulnerable. And then in the doorway is Eli's nurse, Cooper. I hadn't seen him in a year. He was on his way home from his job, very demanding job, and he was on his way home, and he said, 3 times I heard Eli's voice say, go to Lisa. He said, I kept driving, and the 3rd time I turned around. And I just think that's very powerful. It's made me a believer.
That's a very good story. I'm glad we waited. That I did.
It's exactly who he would have spoken to about that too. Like he was trying to convince me in footage you didn't see to keep Cooper on to take care of Mom. And Mom doesn't really like Cooper being around that much. So I was like, it's going to be up to Mom. But he's like, okay, but promise me. Like she, you'll get it done. You'll get her taken care of, So he would have gone to Cooper.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. And of course, your cats were of no help at all, helping you get up. They just watch. I know. They just look at you like, why are you on the ground? Morgan, I'd love to hear sort of, I think at the beginning of the film, one of my favorite moments is the moment where you sort of are, in no uncertain terms, told that you are now sort of being watched over, being pulled into the T team very, very, very firmly. And you're like, well, all right, here we are. I'd love to hear sort of as a newer member of the T team, tasked with composing and sort of working in this collaboration, kind of what struck you in either sort of what we see or in the aftermath and the edit and all that.
I was probably one of the few people that wasn't the immediate family that was there a lot, like pretty much all the time. And that Symbol was with me.
And Symbol.
Go over there for 8 hours at a time. And I kept saying to Ondi, I was like, your family, you guys get along so well. Like I just expected it to break at some point because I've seen that happen around death. People can get loopy and say and do weird things, and it just never happened. And I was like, wow, you guys are really get along really well. So I was pretty impressed. I was happy to be part of a T team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Unless you know Ondi well, like you don't really know that she films literally everything. Like we go on dog walks and we go around the same block, and there's always filming happening on that block, even though every day it's the same block. I'm like, why are we still, So she pretty quickly roped me into filming, making sure that everything was filmed because that's what needs to happen because that's how she is. So I was filming a lot, and it was good. It gave me a chance to do something while I was there for hours on end.
She'd never operated a camera,
Yeah.
of course. Like I wasn't going to
course
have a DP come and film this
Yeah.
situation that was going on.
Yeah.
And Morgan was there to support me and started grabbing some of the greatest shots in the film. She'd never even used a camera. She also scored the film. If you want to just take can she have applause for that? Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks. With scoring, Ondi and I worked very collaboratively on everything, and it was a unique opportunity because I was there.
Yeah.
I mean, what composer is there during the filming of a documentary and is part of it, you know? So I got a firsthand. I knew what it was supposed to feel like and everything. There was no doubt about that. But it also is not an easy task to film. I mean, to do the music to a very long scene of someone dying. And Ondi said, I want it to be womb-like, and I want it to womb, yeah. And I really realized that it needed to be almost like like a river that's kind of carrying people very subtly through this experience without getting in the way. Anytime I added any ornamentation of any sort, it really stood out. And so it was almost like a mantra or a chant or a dirge where people could just rely on it always being there. So there were some challenges, but in all, it was obviously very easy to connect with emotionally, and cried a lot during the process.
Yeah. Wonderful. I love hearing about that process.
And they were a new couple at that time. And so to be thrust into such a scene, you know, I mean, you must have thought it was, I don't even know what you thought it was.
I would say that to her at night. I'd say, I can't believe like you're giving space for what's happening right now, because I just thrust us into production, you know, at the same time that suddenly my father's dying, and she just showed up quietly with Symbol the Bimble, who had a really tough week.
Yeah,
and they would be there to support.
Yeah, I think it is honestly like just a very unique circumstances that all come about. I mean, what are the chances that you have a daughter that's a director and a daughter who is a rabbi, you know? And it just, there were lots of things like that what also made it possible on a production level is Ondi has an office behind the house. So yeah, where Lisa lives. So there's a back door, and so it's just really easy to be like, we need more batteries, or here's some SD cards, we're putting it back there. And it was a way of it being, there wasn't traffic in the house of people, but you were able to get things done, so.
Eli and I lived in Ondi's house. She was the first child we had who could afford to buy a house. So that was her first house where she had her baby. And he was how old when? Well, we moved from Miami in 2005, and she quickly bought another house and moved us into her house because it was perfect, one level for Eli and just the right size. So
all the pets could be there without worrying about a landlord. And I thought Dad was going to, they first moved to an apartment at, like, if you remember Karate Kid, it looked like it was out of Karate Kid. And I saw Dad walking up the stairs, and I said to my then boyfriend, like, I don't know if he's going to fall, when he's going to fall, but it's going to happen soon, you know? And it felt very urgent to get them into a one level house. But the idea was the film had to be really invisible, even though Dad had given consent and Mom had given consent, and everybody seemed to actually, my brother, it was interesting because he and I founded Interloper Films together, and he is now an editor, so he would never normally have cameras, you know, set up. But when his kids came to visit with Dad, I found him behind the camera sort of operating, you know, because the main microphones on Dad were going into this one camera that was shooting in my son's old bedroom. We moved when he was 7. So I knew the angles of the house, you know, and I put a camera like by his old bookshelf and shooting my father and whoever was sitting with him. Right. So I found my son watching Mom and Dad one night, and I came up to him, and he just had tears streaming down his face. He was listening to their intimate conversation and watching them, but they had total privacy in a sense, except now that you all have it on screen. So they had no privacy, it turned out, but anyway.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's profound.
It's very profound. Yeah. And I think, you know, and I mean, I don't know, one of the things that I think is most beautiful is, like, toward the end, like, everyone is trying to occupy their time, whether it's by helping with this production, playing football, just doing things to be like, we are in this waiting period, and but the time is part of that, and the durationality of including some of those, like, literally just waiting feeling.
Well, it was like every minute was so precious to all of us. You know, the only reason why that shot of Gigi, you know, is on a surveillance camera is because every camera had run out of battery. And it was just not our main focus. And as I started to say, our main focus was getting Dad to realize that he'd given us everything when he thought he gave us nothing, you know? We had this period of time to convince him otherwise. And it was like my sister came in like special forces, you know? And she doesn't like cameras, so the whole thing had to become invisible by the time she got there.
Yeah.
So I had like the last 5 days, and so the cameras were like behind the TV and on the hospital tray and in the other room, and she was a great sport about it. She said that, you know, obviously the main event was so much more important than, she didn't let the cameras get in the way, and nobody really realized them. So that was, you know, obviously key to the whole thing. And as Morgan said, the fact that the house was right in front of the office allowed the process of filmmaking to disappear. And the reason I put a surveillance camera was because I wanted to make sure I had the run of time and duration, and I knew when things happened without having to necessarily be a filmmaker and track the cards or things like that.
Right.
I just wanted to try to help Dad, and we all did, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
We celebrated his life.
Yes.
That's really what we
Yes.
were allowed to do,
Right.
you know?
That's why when she criticized me for not getting it, not being serious enough, and I understood these 15 days to be a celebration, and I was in hostess mode, you know?
Right.
And you know, I don't know what the kids wanted me to act like.
Well, we wanted you to be with Dad. and since then, you have been just missing him, like really, really missing him. Yeah. And the film coming out has been a wonderfully, I think, cathartic thing for you. Wonderful. But we all knew that he was going to be gone and you were going to be in shock, and you were, weren't you?
I sort of still am. It's gotten worse, my missing him. And I think part of it is audiences like you. You know, it reminds me of how special he was and what I lost, you know? So, yeah, it's hard to be left.
Yeah. It's true. We have time for one more question, but then after that, we're going to invite all of you to come with us to Pomona Cider Company, which is down the block and across the street, and we'll get a chance to keep sort of convivializing, keep telling stories.
And then I will be able to see who you are.
Yes, and Lisa wants to see who you are.
We are blind up here.
It's they're out there, I promise.
And you get to,
And you can.
you'll have to see the photo of Dad, for sure.
Yes, we'll all
won't
admire your jewelry, and Symbol will let you give him scritches, and probably find all the food, all the popcorn that you have dropped. He will eat it on the way out. But yes, make sure that you scan that QR code before we leave.
Yeah, check it out. I mean, we're going to be going. We're in LA, New York, Albany, New York for the New York State Legislature, and in Reno, Nevada for that. And then we're going to DC, where, believe it or not, there's an old law which nobody seemed to know about, oddly enough, banning federal funding for any help with medical aid in dying. So even in the 10 states where it's legal, if you don't have enough money, you don't have equal access to it. We had to pay, as you saw, for the medicine. And that's why. And that since 1997, this law has existed, and this great sort of political publicist in Washington discovered this, and now my friend Congressman Brittany Pedersen is writing a bill to repeal it.
Yeah.
And we're going to get bipartisan support, and we're going to Washington June 7th to bring it there. Yeah.
And you say that Wisconsin is on one of the states that's trying to.
Yeah, and Wisconsin's one of the
make
states
movement,
that, I mean,
so.
you know, it's only for people that are terminally ill and have less than 6 months, you know? And they can't have any other control over their bodies and what's happening to them. You know, it's the one thing they can maybe control, and it allows the whole family, as you saw, to come in and have closure. Yeah. And it just seems like a basic human right to us at this point. I've never become an activist. I made a lot of films, and I've never turned into an activist. But now, yeah.
She's got to tell you that this film has changed the law in Reform Judaism.
That's true. Mm-hmm. So since the film has come out, this is for Canada because they have equal access. It's specifically for Canada. But the concept is, the rabbis said that when they wrote the law a millennia ago, that the average time of suffering was maybe 5 days. And now it's years, you know, and can be years. And Then they went on to say that they believe, and quoting a great rabbi whose name I'm going to forget right now, but probably some of you know, that a law without tenderness is wickedness. So yeah, there's just a lot of education and sort of opening of hearts and minds that this film is able to do, and we're going to try to make it as available to the movement, which is hopefully a growing movement. I honestly think the reason it's not a right is because we don't talk about death and dying, and it's so stigmatized, and it's so hard to talk about and to think about, and it's scary, you know? And so hopefully this will help in some way.
Hospice has changed.
Oh, and in California, hospice has changed also. Like this process that you saw, Dad, the sort of one guy called it a thriller at the end when he's running this obstacle course, and you have no idea if he's going to drink it in 2 minutes.
Right.
Apparently, there's still a time thing on it. There's going to be experts there on May 10th in LA at the screening, so I'll know more. But it's one drink now. I'm not sure how long you have to drink it. And it's flavored. Yeah, there's chocolate in it. So there's a lot of like these advancements that need to happen even in the process. Like in Canada, it's an injection. You know, so it's painless in that way. It's just like goodbye, and you say your goodbyes, and then off you go. Exactly. It's weird. But we have just even to get you the right first. Then we'll work on the process.
Step by step by step. Yes, absolutely. So please do come and join us across the street and down the block at Pomona Cider Company. It is to the south. If you don't know what down the block means, I mean south, and also
She
downhill.
means left.
Turn left out the door.
That's better.
Come. Continue to celebrate Eli's life, maybe with a little beverage. And
thank you so much,
Thank
Kara.
you.
Thank you for the kind attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Milwaukee. Thank you.
Thank you.